Steveston, British Columbia, a small fishing village at the mouth of the Fraser River, was at the turn of the century a prosperous, growing fishing settlement that attracted many immigrants from Japan. Spurred by the Meiji Restoration in the late 1800s, many Japanese came to Canada to seek a better way of life. The shift from an agrarian economy to an industrial one in Japan had caused great difficulty in many Japanese cities and towns. What were once thriving communities had become burdened with poverty and hardship. In 1868, the first group of men left the shores of Japan heading for North America. The first wave of emigrants landed in Hawaii to work on sugarcane plantations, but as that destination became populated, others sought to improve their fortunes in British Columbia. The steady migration to Canada peaked in the years between 1905 and 1908, when by that time over 10,000 Japanese immigrants had landed in British Columbia. The two largest groups of migrants were from the Shiga and Wakayama prefectures in Japan. Immigrants from the Shiga region tended to settle in Vancouver, while the fishermen from Wakayama favored the village of Steveston, which had achieved an international reputation for its burgeoning salmon fishing industry. Prior to World War II, the Japanese-Canadian population of Steveston, who were mostly employed in the fishing industry, at its height numbered over 1,900 individuals. While these Issei, or first-generation Japanese, worked to integrate themselves into Canadian society, they increasingly turned to their homeland culture as a means of coping in this newly adopted home. Judo, the word literally means the gentle way, was founded as a sport in Japan by Dr. Jigoro Kano in 1882. Judo was a sport that was a hybrid of traditional martial arts jiu-jitsu techniques and his creation of unique judo techniques. For Dr. Kano, judo was not only a physical discipline, but it also embodied a spiritual and cultural way of living life. In about 1932, in order to provide the Japanese-Canadian community's growing families with a meaningful recreational activity, a judo club in Steveston was formed.
夏はベースボールなんかあったけどね、このウィンターはとても暇だったから、その自分にも剣道始まったと思うんです。それから若い者は行くとこないからね、剣道か柔道に大抵の人は入ったのよね。その続く続かんは問題、入ってもすぐ辞める人もおったけどね、柔道始まってから一時寂れておったんやけどね、またうちの春なんか 7人ね入ってきてから十分盛んになって、それからこの移動する時にね、みんなその時はとても柔道盛んになっとったのしてよしたもね。
With assistance from the Tai Iku Dojo in Vancouver and its head instructor Shigetaka Sasaki, judo classes were held from November to April, the off-season when most fishermen had free time.
佐々木先生は日本からもう黒帯で来たんでしょ。佐々木先生は鳥取県、ジャパンの鳥取県から来られたのね。
The first judo practices were held in a 30 by 40-foot room that was rented from the Steveston Language School. Since proper tatamis, or judo mats, were unavailable, the floor was covered with straw and canvas to give the judokas, the judo students, a safe surface to practice on. The Steveston Japanese Language School had no central heating, so in the winter months it was up to the judoka and the volunteers to haul wood to the school and fire up the wood stove for heat. After a hard night's practice, the students and instructors always looked forward to a hot wood-heated Japanese-style bath. The instructors only received tea and gas money as remuneration for volunteering their time, and in some instances, money. Throughout the 30s, Dr. Kano traveled the world promoting judo. In 1938, he visited Vancouver on his way back to Japan after attending a meeting of the International Olympic Committee in Cairo. It was during this visit that Dr. Kano made and dedicated a prize calligraphy for the Steveston Judo Club. Since that time, it has always been displayed in a place of prominence wherever the club is practiced.
加納さんに一度オリンピックのミーティングにヨーロッパに行かれた帰りにね、バンコワへ寄られて、その時にこのバンコワでこの歓迎送別ようなパーティーあってね、私も呼ばれました。努めれば必ず達すっていう意味ですよ。努めれて力っていう字がね、あれ努めれば必ず達す。それから何事でも一生懸命にやれば必ずそれが成功するっていう意味はね、まあ早く言えば。
Dr. Kano emphasized the primary objective of judo was to put forth one's best effort and not in winning or losing. He developed the practice of judo into a system for training the mind and the body. He emphasized two basic principles of judo: maximum efficiency and mutual benefit and welfare. For the Japanese Canadians of Steveston, judo was no doubt a meaningful cultural activity, but no one knew how long the club would exist, nor to what extent its tenets and principles would be relevant to the greater Steveston community. In February 1942, the Canadian government declared that all Japanese living in Canada were enemy aliens. Over 22,000 Japanese from the west coast of British Columbia were forcefully evacuated to internment camps throughout Western Canada. Homes, businesses, fishing boats, and personal possessions were all confiscated and sold off at a fraction of their value to pay for the costs of internment. The judo club was disbanded as judo was considered a threat to national security. Through the valiant effort of some of the founding members of the judo club in Steveston, however, the practice of judo was kept alive in the internment camps, but it would be another 8 years before judo would return to the coast.
We were in Tajme in 1942, I guess. And I ran into lots of sensei in Tajme there, like Steve Sasaki. And most of these head instructor from Steveston area.
By 1949, Japanese Canadian families began returning to the coast, and by 1953, 10 of the original senseis began to reorganize the club into what is today's Steveston Judo Club. In the early days after the war, Steveston was not a hospitable place for the returning Japanese Canadians, and despite all the other challenges of rebuilding their lives, the founding sensei and the growing Japanese Canadian community rallied to restore the club.
Richmond High School, junior high school, I was attending. This guy, a little bit taller than guy, always bullying me, but I ignored him, and I keep on bugging me all the time. Eh? So one time I went from man training room to the washroom, come back in the hallway. He blocked me to get into this man training room. So I tried to block again, but I just grabbed him and just threw him down. And then he got really scared. Eh? So I asked him, I warn you before, don't bug me or otherwise I give it to you. And then after I threw him, he got really scared. I said, I warned you, so you got it. And then if you want me to be friends with me, we'll shake hands, but now, otherwise you just leave me alone. But he shook my hand and we'll be friends after that.
In alphabetical order, the 10 original sensei were Mr. Tom Doi, Mr. Seiichi Hamanishi, Mr. Takeo Kawasaki, Mr. Harry Kuramoto, Mr. Kunji Kuramoto, Mr. Yutaka Mizuguchi, Mr. Yukio Mizuguchi, Mr. Yonakazu Sakai, Mr. Kanezo Tokai, and Mr. Soichi Ueyama. After the war, the club moved from building to available building.
There was no place to practice. to start with, you know, and we were always moving. Then in 1956, we moved to the Red Cross Hall, which is next to the Steveston Hotel. And that was the first time we had actual judo mats. And the Koenkai raised the money to buy used judo tatami, which came from Seattle. And Mr. Frank Sakai and one other member went down to Seattle to see if they could purchase some mats. And so in those days, there was a wood stove in there, and it would be very cold in the wintertime. So if we didn't get there early enough to start the stoves, sometimes you could, the mats were so cold, there was a little frost on the mats. So we would all try to get together and say, okay, let's make sure we get there by 6:30 and get the stoves going. But if there was no one there to start the stoves, we used to do what we call newaza, mat work, and try to warm up and get our blood flowing. And then by the time we finished mat work, the stoves would actually heat the room up, so it was okay.
The judo uniforms, called judogis, were mostly handmade by the mothers out of rice sacks or canvas. And, since the fishing season restricted the sensei to teaching in the winter months only, the older students were often put in the position of running the classes and representing the club at tournaments. Through the tireless and selfless efforts of the founding members, the students, the ever-growing Japanese-Canadian community, especially the Koenkai or the Parent Support Group, they were able to rekindle the popularity and pride in the club.
The Koenkai have been very, very active from day one. As soon as the black belt instructors got together and decided to form a judo club, there was a parent group behind the judo senseis. And the Koenkai were not only member children that came to judo, but they were really the whole Japanese community here. And the Japanese community is mostly comprised of Buddhist church people and United Church people. There's only basically two groups here. And whenever the judo club said, okay, we need to raise money for tatami, for the mats, for instance, the Koenkai would go out and solicit money for the tatami. Or when we wanted to move to another place that cost us money, they would raise enough money to pay the rent. And then when we started having tournaments in around 1955, Koenkai ladies would prepare all the dinners for all the, not only guests, but in those days even the competitors. And the Koenkai men would look after all the front in terms of people coming in. And Japanese, one of the cultural or traditions is that any function that happens in the Japanese community, they bring a donation, they bring an envelope, and it's a donation to the club.
By the early 50s, the return of Japanese families to Steveston had revitalized the community, whose population had shrunk to almost 50% of its original size during the war.
At that time, there was 80 members started. They were all Japanese. And the instructors, the senseis, were all fishermen. So in the wintertime, we would go four days a week. And then when fishing started in about April, then we'd have to close the judo club up again.
When the Japanese first came to Steveston, their intention was to work, save money, and then return to their Japanese homeland. As time went on, however, their goals slowly changed. Many began to see Canada as their new home and started to build their futures in British Columbia as new Canadians. Before the war, the Japanese community had built their own hospital and language school. They also worked together with non-Japanese residents to build Lord Byng School so that all of Steveston's children could learn in a common environment. In spite of the loss of their worldly possessions and harsh treatment during the war years, the returning Japanese families focused their energies on building positive relationships with their neighbors rather than becoming angry or embittered. By the mid-50s, tensions between the local non-Japanese and the Japanese communities were easing, and in 1955, the BC Packers Fishing Company offered the Japanese community a plot of land so that the Japanese could build a facility dedicated solely for their purposes.
The Japanese fishermen had approached Ken Fraser, who was manager of British Columbia Packers, and Ken said, okay, I'll give you a piece of property and you can build a building on it. But at the same time, there was the Steveston Community Society was talking about building a community center in this area, in the park here. And they asked the Japanese group to join them. And there was discussions for approximately 2 years. And the Japanese people said, okay, 2 conditions we will join. One was that there be a permanent facility for judo, and 2 is when kendo starts up, the club starts up, they'll be able to use the gym. So the Steveston Japanese Fishermen's Benevolent Association before the war had $15,000 of money, and they put that money into the original community center, which was the total cost at that time was $105,000. So that was a substantial amount of money that came from the Japanese community. But I think more than that, I think with what happened to the Japanese during internment and before the war, I think that was a real big milestone in the history of Steveston and Richmond here. And it was one of the first things of a healing process, I think, that happened between, the white people and the Japanese.
The building of the Steveston Community Center was an entire community effort that was at once a symbolic and physical bridge between cultures.
One of the major programs we had in there for years and years and years was the Japanese language school. And they, in turn, of course, used to put on or still do, matter of fact, put on a bazaar once a year, and all the profits and proceeds from that went back into the community center for recreational programs. When you think back over 30, 40 years that this has been going on, it's quite a large contribution, a valuable contribution they made towards the community.
In 1957, the Steveston Judo Club moved into its first ever permanent residence, a 20 by 40 foot room dedicated exclusively to the practice of judo within the halls of the newly constructed Steveston Community Center. It was during the time of the opening of the club at the community center that the club invited its first guest sensei, or instructor from Japan, Sensei T. Inoue, to coach and instruct the members of the club. The 50s and the 60s witnessed the maturation of the club and its members. Although the club still only officially operated during the fishing off-season, the students advanced enough to begin receiving black belts. The club's evolution was also evidenced by the growing reach of individual club members. Notable amongst the growing number of achievements of the club's alumni were Kyo Nomura, who opened the Nanaimo Judo Club in 1960, and Tom Mukai, who was the first Canadian-born judoka to travel to Japan and train at the Kodokan, the Judo World Headquarters in Tokyo. Founding sensei Harry Kuromoto received his black belt under the tutelage of his brother, Kunji, while interned during the war. In addition to teaching judo at the Vancouver YMCA in the early 50s, Harry opened 2 affiliate judo clubs, one in Ladner and another in Burkeville, a small community in Richmond adjacent to the Vancouver International Airport.
I went to help Vancouver Judo Club, Mr. Tamato Sensei, and he asked me to go and teach YMCA. So me and Sai Muro take turn to go down like Saturday and teach judo.
The 50s and 60s were years of tumultuous change in all of Western society, and Steveston was not excluded. The offspring of the first generation of Japanese immigrants born in British Columbia were growing up with Western customs and attitudes. They began having families of their own and in many cases marrying non-Japanese mates. For the first time in the history of the Judo Club, non-Japanese and women became active members. The first two non-Japanese members of the Judo Club were Brian Thorne McConnell and Hugh McConnell. Garth Musto was awarded his black belt in 1963, the first person not of Japanese ancestry to do so at the Steveston Judo Club. At the age of 14 years old, Alma Stokes joined the Steveston Judo Club, the first ever female member of the club. Expecting and given no special treatment for being a woman, she competed against male opponents and was awarded her black belt at the age of 18 years. The scope of activities and popularity of the club increased to the point that by 1969 there were over 150 active members, comprised of young and old, men and women alike. In 1966, a move was set afoot to build a martial arts center dedicated solely to the practice of the martial arts.
We were getting overflow of students in the community center, so that was the reason for this building. But during that time, yeah, it was growth, and judo was popular.
The building of the Steveston Martial Arts Center took over 6 years to fund and organize. By March of 1972, through the concerted volunteer efforts of many individuals and organizations, the Steveston Martial Arts Center opened its doors to house the Steveston Judo Club and the Steveston Kendo Club.
We made application on behalf of our organization for the construction of this building, and it became we became aware shortly thereafter that there were some other organizations also making application, one of them being the construction of a running track in Mineru Park, and the other one was the construction of some facilities in the nature park. And I guess we sat back and said, hey, we got a pretty good chance of getting picked number one. But as it happened, the running track was picked as the project. Shortly thereafter, Bob McMath, who was counselor at that time and very great supporter of recreation enrichment and certainly a supporter of our organization, met with me, and we had some discussions about the value of our project as against other projects, the other two projects. And although I didn't sit in any meetings, it came to pass that the council reviewed the whole process and decided that they would take all the funding available and divide it 3 ways. So we got 1/3 of the monies available towards the construction of the martial arts building.
Traditionally styled by architect Arnold Petzold, who studied and lived in Japan for a number of years, the Martial Arts Center was the first of its kind to ever be built outside of Japan.
In 1970s, there was still some apprehension by the Japanese people, because at that time there was 3 Japanese on the board of directors of the Steveston Community Society that voted against having a Japanese-style building. They wanted a 2-story building. But it was people like Harold Steves and the Caucasians that said, no, we want to build a Japanese architectural building. And so I think that kind of cemented the community friendship between the Japanese and the Caucasians.
I think I sensed in my mind that something of this sort that was different and unique to the area had to be good for the area. So I guess in that context, yeah, I feel good. I feel good because many of the people that went through the programs are good citizens here in this area and other parts to wherever they've gone to. And yeah, it makes you feel good. I mean, I guess that's why you do it. That's why you do it. It's just personal satisfaction.
Its opening was celebrated not only by the entire Richmond community, but was also celebrated by representatives from the Kodokan in Japan and acknowledged by Prime Minister Trudeau, who himself was a black belt. the Steveston Martial Arts Center remains a spectacular result of an enormous volunteer effort that so clearly demonstrated the community spirit of judo and its tenet of mutual welfare and benefit. The Martial Arts Center was a testament to the growing success and popularity of the club. By the end of the 70s, the Steveston Judo Club had produced 45 black belts who successfully competed at national and international levels, and several provincial coaches, one national coach, and numerous provincial, national, and international status referees. The members of the club competed almost weekly in local and regional tournaments. The club has produced many exceptional individuals who have competed at numerous national and international competitions. Alan Sakai, in addition to winning locally and regionally, competed at the 1972 Olympics.
In competition, I guess my favorite technique was Morote Seonage, and I think everybody's body type lends them towards certain techniques, being shorter and more squat, and finding that it was easier to develop upper body strength for me, that the Morote Seonage seemed to be the technique that suited my body type the best and my mentality.
Since its inception, the club has always maintained close ties with Japan. The 60s and 70s were no different, and during this time there was a steady flow of international guests invited to the club to teach and practice judo. Combined with the commitment of its own teachers, the Koen Kai, and the presence of quality local athletes, Steveston Judokas enjoyed consistent success in competition at every level and continue to do so even to this day. It is a common opinion of senior members of the club that its success post-war was due in large part to the club's three key instructors, Tom Doi, Kunji Kuramoto, and Frank Sakai. These senseis maintain the club's adherence to the principles of judo as outlined by Dr. Kano. The practice of judo in Steveston was kept true to the tenets laid down by its founder.
One of the things that Japanese people, whenever they come here, they want to get a picture with Kano-sensei's calligraphy behind me. And I think they felt that some of our traditional things that we do in Richmond here and Steveston are more stronger than what they do in Japan. And so I think that, some of the judo things that we've tried to maintain in our club, like the rei, for instance, a bow, I think we insist upon it even more than in Japan. Mr. Sakai used to say to me as I was going up the ladder in terms of refereeing and politically, he said to me, if you ever do something for personal gain, I will make you quit. But he said, if you do it for the good of judo and the community, I will encourage you, I'll help you in any way I can.
During the 80s, the club continued its tradition of inviting guest sensei and athletes from Japan, as well as fostering exchange programs, most notably with Japan's leading judo universities at Tokai and Kokusai Budo. 1983 marked the 30th anniversary of the club, and in that year a celebration dinner was held with over 200 guests and attendees. By the occasion of the dinner, however, of the 10 founding senseis, only 7 were able to attend. 3 had passed away. During the 70s and 80s, it was the Nisei, or second generation, and Sansei, or third generation of judoka, that were largely responsible for the successful running of the club. Haruo Hirata, Jim Kojima, Art Nishi, Isao Kuramoto, Martin Kuramoto, and Tatsumura were the main instructors of influence.
Our only mandate was to teach Kodokan Judo, and we really emphasize etiquette, good technique, and be a good person. I think that was, right from the start, that was kind of drilled into us. So that's been our main focus for this club.
Like if you can get it across to them that it's up to them to learn. We're not trying to force it on them, and we can't do it for them. You know, like if they realize that whatever they accomplish, it's themselves that did it in the long run. If I can get that across to them, well, you can see the big change in them when they do appreciate that fact.
It is a testament to their selfless commitment that most of them continue to instruct to this day.
I think the whole idea of mutual benefit is really important in judo. The fact that the instructor gets as much out, or maybe even more, than the students. I think each time I'm teaching judo, I'm thinking about how can I teach this student, or how can I better teach the class? What's in that technique that that student needs, or this student needs? How can I modify this? So a lot of thinking about how to be a better teacher I get out of instructing judo at the club.
By 1993, and the 40th anniversary of the club, another founding sensei had passed away. In 1994, for the first time in the history of Canadian judo, 4 of the founding sensei were inducted as life members of Judo Canada in recognition of their pioneering efforts in promoting judo. During this time, Tim Hirose became an important instructor, as well as Fred Tan from 2000 and on.
On behalf of the Steveston Judo Club, we'd like to welcome you to the 50th anniversary celebration.
2003 marked the club's 50th anniversary. During the year, several events were held commemorating the event and its 3 remaining founding sensei.
There are 2 types of champions out there. One is the one where you stand on the podium and you get medals. The other meaning of champion is a defender of a cause. And we feel that our founding senseis really are true champions in that sense of that word.
いやね、こういうあんまり派手なことはあんまり好きな方でないのよね。それでも一緒に始めたでしょ。この土井さんとか高井さんとか。でみんな亡くなったら私もう一番年寄りで一人だろ。それだったらやっぱり亡くなった人のためにでも柔道のためにでもやっぱりパレードのあれにね選ばれた時にどうするかなってちょっと思案したのよ。それでもやっぱりこの柔道始まって50年でしかそのパレードに乗らなきゃみんな亡くなった人らに対しても悪いわなっていう気になってね、それで乗らせてもらったのよね。
From humble beginnings through the difficulties of the war, clashing cultures, and worldwide societal changes, the Steveston Judo Club has met the challenges of remaining relevant and meaningful to its members and the community at large.
ステーブスタンでこの50年の戦後50年の間に私らにその柔道に入った子どもたちの中に悪いこの方に向いてこの新聞に書くような悪いことをしたっていう人をまだ聞かないから、それだけまだありがたいなと思っています。これからでもそういう人は伝統は限らんよね。柔道やったからみんなに決まってないけど、それでもそんなに新聞に書かれるような悪い事件に出たような柔道家はいないから、それだけでも柔道はありがたいのって思うんだよね。
You have to become a good citizen. That's what Jigoro Kano wanted, was to serve society and to help the world to grow. So I feel very strong about that.
Well, I hope people that do judo pick up that some etiquette, that they have to do their best at anything they do, and then be a good person. I think those 3 things, I think anybody that does judo can pick up those 3 things.
I think I also see as important teaching kids how to take a breakfall in life. We're all going to fail. We're all going to have to learn to pick ourselves up. And I think judo is a good way of teaching that mental attitude that, yeah, you're going to get thrown, you're going to fall. You just do a breakfall, pick yourself up, and start again. So I saw myself changing from teaching skills to teaching more a way or an attitude of life.
Despite its remarkable 50-year history and successes, many new challenges face the club moving into the future.
The club is evolving because it has to, because the forces of society are making it change, and it's going to change anyways. And the more we accept the change and the hybridity, I think the easier it'll be. The more we fight against it, I think it's going to cost the club. And yeah, I've seen changes. I think there was a time when things were more black and white, and the instructors could make decisions and say, this is the way it's going to be. In the last little while, I think parental influences and all those other forces, I think, are making us take a closer look at what the needs of the students are, as opposed to what the needs of judo is, what the needs of the parents are, as opposed to this is the way it's going to be, the needs of each instructor is, as opposed to we're all going to do it this way. So I've seen that change and hybridity happening at the club.
The makeup of the club has evolved dramatically. The membership, which originally were all Japanese, is now comprised of persons of non-Japanese ancestry. Judo, since the early 50s, has become a truly multinational sport. Over the history of the Steveston Judo Club, hundreds of participants have enjoyed membership in the club.
Every culture has its good points as well as its bad points. And in multiculturalism, I don't think we look closely enough at the things that aren't working in the culture. And we just say that the Japanese-Canadian culture is great, we should learn about it. Let's have a big show, let's do the dances, let's wear the kimonos, let's promote judo. Whereas in hybridity, what we're saying is all of us need to take the parts of every culture that are good, that we like, that we can access, and make that part of our lives. So we are in fact all hybrids. Everything that we see on TV, listen to, read to, talk to different people affects us. And if we hang on to the fact that we're a Japanese Canadian, hang on to that idea of multiculturalism, it can only take us so far. And if we want to get beyond racism and profiling and all those kinds of things, I think we have to take on that idea of hybridity, of accepting all cultures, all ideas, and examining them carefully and bringing them into what we do. And at the Judo Club, we try to do that. I think more than any other time, we need somebody who is accepting of every person, seeing their stories and not rejecting them outright, but saying, okay, what part of that judoka's story do we need to take in, no matter what club or what race or what religion they come from? How are we going to get that idea of hybridity here? Because I think that the future of the club depends on that more than multiculturalism.
For the founders of the club and its early members, it was a way to stay connected with ancestral roots in a foreign land. For the many that followed through to its participants today, it remains a sport, a martial art, and a discipline that allows for strengthening of mind, body, and spirit. In every succeeding generation, the club and its supporters have conducted themselves in the true spirit of selfless volunteer dedication and contribution to keep the club funded and operational.
For our club to exist another 50 years, for instance, we have to teach is the good things of judo. And what I mean by the good things is the philosophy of judo. And our children today want to take, you know, they want to take as much as they can from the judo black belts, for instance, or from other people. But someday they have to learn to give back. And it means to give back not only, maybe it could be financially, for instance, or it could be coming to teach at the judo club. And that's how the judo club will continue on for another 50, 100 years. If we don't get that kind of feeling of wanting to give back, then I think that this judo club will not exist for another 50 years.
I think there's an idea out there that people that volunteer or come and teach without getting paid, that they are saints or something like that. But I really believe that everyone that steps onto the judo mat, whether you're a student or an instructor or a referee, you are getting something back. And that whole idea that in judo mutual benefit is really important. No one is really sacrificing. So every time you step on the mat, you get something back. Or every time you do something for a judo tournament, you're doing something for judo, there's always, you get something back out of it, whether you recognize it at that time or not. And I think that's really important to understand, because a lot of people might think that people that give up their own time or money or energy to do something, that you're doing it altruistically. But I really believe that you're going to get something back. And I have, in all my years of doing judo and of being the president of the club, the time I've spent has come back to me tenfold.
The coaches, instructors, the Koenkai, and the members themselves, in keeping with the true spirit of mutual benefit and welfare, have each in their own way contributed to the club's considerable success. In addition to its record of producing world-class athletes, the Steveston Judo Club's status has also become international in scope in the areas of refereeing and administration. As the next generations of members take up the challenge of taking the club into the future, the tenets put forth by Dr. Kano may remain as key as they always have been in the success of the club.
この加納先生の今言われたつもりは必ず達すっていう言葉ね、あれは肝心な言葉ですよね。で自他共栄の言葉ね、あれは皆自分もよかったら人もよい、そういう気持ちを皆持ってもらって、それでその柔道のあれをずっと教えていってもらったら、もうこれには何も間違いないでしょ。その希望を持ってますよ。